Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about some basic ship design, the engineering report, lift, and thrust. I've got a lot of questions about this ship and how I was able to get over 2,000 tons out of atmosphere and also do a tail-sit landing with over 2,000 tons with this ship. So we're going to talk about the engineering report and the basic process of designing ships. Before we get into all that, I'm going to answer the most asked question I've had, which was how I hid my wings on this ship. Now, I've already kind of started taking the ship apart. I've built another ship from this design already, which I'm going to show, but I'll show kind of what I did with the wings on this ship. In that video, this ship used extra small wings, and this is how they were set up. You can angle wings and stack them like this without obstructing them. So this had these wings inside the ship, right here, stacked all the way along the surface in these 3 rows, as well as on the bottom of the ship down here, in a row here and a row here, and they were inside the ship. Now you can block elements with megavoxels. There's a tutorial on voxelmancy that you can watch on Infinity Corporation's channel. But here's an example of kind of a megavoxel. You take a voxel and you stretch its bounds outside of the voxel. So you see here how this one goes beyond. This is actually one voxel. There's nothing in this space, even though it's stretched out there. So if I click here and copy, there's nothing. It's empty. If I click here and copy, I get that voxel. So you can see this voxel is stretched. So what you can do with this, an example here, even though it's a little ugly, if I cover these wings, because they're not actually covered, this voxel isn't actually here, the wings are not blocked. So you can completely bury elements using megavoxels. Another example, even engines. If I rotate this like so, you see how it extends beyond. Oops. So I can bury the engine. I can do this across the whole thing, and it does not get blocked. Okay, so that's how you can use megavoxels to hide elements without obstructing them. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the design process and how you decide what elements you need on your ship to meet a certain need. The most typical one is lift a certain amount of weight. To do that, you're going to use the 2 flight engineers, atmospheric and space flight engineer. Okay. So when you're first starting out on building a ship, the first thing I put on there is a container, and I fill it with the amount of weight I want that ship to lift. And that way, as you add elements, the flight engineer is going to update accurately with that amount of weight. So you can get your low altitude lift, low altitude lift, high altitude lift, and your max thrust above what you need to get out of atmosphere. Typically above 2 Gs when carrying that amount of weight is pretty decent. You only need a little bit over 1 G, but to make sure it's a little bit easier, try and get it over 2 Gs. I also use just basic ships as prototypes. So this was actually just a little prototype, which is why it's kind of pretty much a basic shape. I just wanted to test that wing theory. And so I just made it, it's a square and a rectangle. The fuel tanks and everything are inside, brakes, and everything's just kind of lined up. It's not very creative, right? So I just for this ship, I wanted to test the theory of having the Atmo engines in the back, space engines on the bottom, and have it rotate in once it hits space, and to fly where the top of the ship is forward and the bottom is the thrust. Once I found the amount of elements I needed to lift a certain amount of weight, I took those elements and I built this ship. It's essentially the same design, but obviously looks a little bit better and has a little bit more style to it. And so that's kind of the design process, is you have a prototype, you build up a certain method, and then you can build more detailed in what you want and arrange the elements a little bit better and come up with a little bit of style. So we'll get into this ship in a little bit, but first let's just build a ship real quick and kind of show what I mean and show the engineering. Okay, so we have our core. All right, so let's put our container on here. Let's just put it out of the way. And let's fill it with some weight. All right, so 80 tons. So we need this ship to lift a full small container into space. So first I'll usually start with some hovers. Let's use small wings. So we'll grab some elements. Let's just start with this for now. Okay, so I'm just putting something that I can drop some elements on. So let's grab all right, so I dropped one of those down, 3.5 Gs of low altitude lift. So that one is more than enough to get this off the ground. So you could do the same thing with medium hovers or small hovers. So I use small hovers. Let's say I have 9. So this isn't going to quite be enough, I don't think, because one hover is only 0.1. I don't really care where they're at. So for small hovers, I would need like 12 or so to get it over, right? Which I don't have enough right now. But it would be like 3 medium hovers. But essentially, you're just dropping your elements until you get over the amount of lift that you need, right? So we'll just drop our large on there again. Make sure it's centered. Now let's see how many wings we need if we wanted to use small wings. We're just looking at the high altitude lift right now. So 2. So that's about 2 Gs of lift with 4. So all we need is 4 small wings to get this thing up into space. What about medium engines? Max thrust 0.67. So that's over 1G. That could probably do it, but like I said, I like to make it a little bit easier, so I would probably go with either 3 or 4. And then space engines. Space engines provide more thrust per engine size. So 2 of these would be enough space thrust. So once you're in space, a little over 1, so actually I'd probably go 3. So just under 2, but that would be enough to get it going in space because you're going to have momentum from the Atmel engines. These would kick in and push you into space, right? And then you need to do, you know, just adjusters, your brakes. Again, get your brakes over whatever amount of G's you want to stop, you know, how quick you want. But that's you're just using the engineering report to put together your ship, right? It's not that complicated. Once you have all your elements, then you start kind of arranging them into a design that you want. And you can start in just a basic concept design, a little blocky, and then kind of move things around and build up from there. But using the engineering report, this is how you decide or find out what capability your ship has. Now you see with the added weight, all these elements, my high altitude lift dropped to 1.5. So I might want to add probably 2 more of these. Stick them on here. And that puts it back over 2 Gs with the new weight of all the extra engines. And then as you add, you know, when I add fuel tanks, a little bit more weight there, and fuel, this might come down a little bit more. So you're kind of, as you add elements, you're just keeping this stuff balanced, right? And as I add more of that, you know, maybe I would need to add 1 more space engine for the amount of weight that I wanted to carry. But you just keep balancing it and just looking at the engineering report. Now there are calculators to kind of calculate this stuff in advance, and there's formulas. I'll put a link to one of those in the description below. It's okay, but as you get into the heavier weights, it's a little bit less and less accurate, and it kind of over predicts what you need for that amount of weight. But you know, it's a good starting point if you wanted to just get a quick idea of how many elements you need for a certain amount of weight. Okay, so that's just kind of a quick basic overview of the flight engineers and how you can decide what you need. Now the voxel work and the design of a ship, you know, making it look decent, that's a whole nother thing. There are voxel Mansi tutorials on how to do some of this stuff. And deciding on the layout, that's really just experimentation and style. And I'm going to show a couple of ships and the different styles that you can do for different purposes. So looking at this ship over here, this one's obviously a cargo hauler, just based off of this design. It has room to park 2 smaller ships. Our skipjacks usually park there. It follows the same concept. It flies into space with the atmospheric engines, or you know, up to the edge of space. The space engines kick in and lift it into space, and then it rotates and it flies where this is actually the back of the ship. Looking at the engineer, right? More than enough thrust and G's to get into space. Obviously this is rotated, currently on the ground. Up is my space engineer, or up is my, really my forward thrust, because it's going to rotate in space. So that's why it shows an error, because I don't have any forward thrust, but really I'm going to rotate anyway, so this is my thrust. 9 G's of brake force. I don't have much weight on this actually at the moment. It's only 1 kiloton. But so with 1 kiloton it has this amount of G's. So I mean this thing can carry probably 4,000 tons. Maybe a little less off of Alioth. But off of any other planet it could carry a whole lot more. You know, when you get to lower gravity, this is going to be a lot of thrust. So it's quite a capable ship. But that's just kind of the general overall basics of how you just, you know, figure out what elements you need to accomplish a task. Arranging them and coming up with a design, I mean, that takes a lot more time and maybe a lot more practice. And so let's go look at another version of a ship that does that. Okay, so we're over here at 1000stars base, and we're going to look at a couple of his ships and show a little bit of different design. This one here is the Ghost Shark. And looking at the engineering, 5 G's of thrust, 293 meters a second. I've noticed this one usually isn't entirely accurate. Only 1.5 G's of low-altitude lift, but this one doesn't lift any weight. It's only for players. There's no cargo on it, so that won't really change. And almost 5 G's of high-altitude lift. So this thing's just a very fast, maneuverable personnel hauler. Or not even hauler, just personal transport. But as far as the design goes, it's the same kind of process. He figures out his elements, kind of places them, and then begins building his voxel shapes and his design around the elements for the performance that he was looking for. Like he wanted a fast ship, maneuverable, and so the elements kind of came first, the design second. And obviously he has a very unique design style. Most of his ships are featured quite a bit by NQ. Some quite amazing designs. And the most important thing to note, this here is his voxel board. He uses the cube and the triangle, and also the tetrahedron, which isn't on here, but I know he uses that a bit. But that's it. There's no crazy advanced voxelmancy and manipulation with any of his builds. This is another one that he's working on. This is a previous ship that he had built. He deployed the voxels this time without the elements, and then he's going to build the elements around the voxels. But that's just because he had already built the ship once. That's not how it was built initially, as far as I'm aware. But yeah, so here's kind of a different take on the style. You know, there's so many different ways you can build ships and arrange the elements, and that's typically why the elements come first. You find out what your engineering report says. You know, find the capability of your ship, come up with a unique layout of that, and then kind of build your voxels around that and move elements as you need to come up with a decent style. This one's the sockeye. So this one can carry some weight, obviously. He's got the large stabilizers. But it was the same process. Looking at this one, 11 G's of high altitude lift. And that's with a current weight of only 200 tons. And he has, does he have, yeah, so he has a medium container on here. So this can carry probably a full medium container of anything pretty easily. Another unique style for the engines. You know, he placed his engines around and then built these voxels around them. And so he typically puts elements at just unique locations and using negative space a lot and interesting shapes. And then he starts to build the voxels around them. And a lot of times just putting the elements in unique orientations to have it look cool. But there's so many different ways to arrange the elements to come up with a cool looking ship, right? So that's kind of why, again, back to the engineering, the elements, finding the elements you need to perform what you need comes first, and then arranging them and designing them comes later. So I just wanted to show, you know, his ships because they are very unique, very stylish, but they also have a purpose. So here's his kind of lower weight hauler. You know, this one doesn't do a large container, but he could easily scale this up and come up with another design for a heavy hauler, which I'll be interested to see what he comes up with for a bigger hauler. This is another one that he's doing called the Kraken. Another crazy design. But again, it's just arranging the elements and then building around it. So that's kind of the design process that a lot of people use and how you figure out the capabilities of a ship before actually building the voxels and actually designing the look of the ship. This here is 1000stars base, also known as 1K. And as you see, he's quite the designer. His stuff is always amazing. His location of his base will be in the description below. This is going to be a bit of a showroom for his ships, and some of his ships will be for sale soon. The first one being the Skipjack, which is this one here. A version of this without the guns will be the one that's for sale. And it's just a personal transport. Very fast, very maneuverable. Just a quick thing going from A to B. But then later on, I'm sure he'll have more designs for sale. I'm not sure which ones he will sell. I don't know if any of these will be for sale, but check back in a few weeks for the Skipjack, and then hopefully not much longer for more designs from then. But yeah, so again, the location in the description below if you want to come check this place out and see as it progresses. Because there's lots of cool styles here, lots of inspiration you can get that does not use voxelmancy. So you don't need to be a voxelmancer to build these ships. All right, thanks guys. Catch you in the next video. And as always, you can join our Discord in the link below if you have any questions, and also comment and like and subscribe. It really helps these videos out and helps us to where we can make more videos for you. All right, thanks. Bye.